we all good to go. All right. So welcome everyone to Coach Cailah TV episode 48. And today we will be discussing cannabis, right? So that's a huge buzzword nowadays. Make sure, before we get into it, make sure you guys subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of the above. And let's jump in. So today I am joined by Dr. Bridget Williams of Green Harvest Health, Medical Cannabis, and Life Coaching. So Dr. Williams is a licensed family doctor who runs her own multifaceted practice in Pickerington, Ohio, as well as Cleveland, Ohio. So Dr. Williams, come on and tell the viewers who you are, how a family doctor came to get involved with medical cannabis.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this today. So I've been a family doctor for nearly 20 years now. I was at the Cleveland Clinic for the majority of that time. How did this start? I think people ask me that a lot. I think a lot of probably my friends or family might even be surprised, but it actually started developing very early in my career. And it was really because I became frustrated early on. So very early in my career, patients come in and, for every problem, there's a pill. If you have another problem, there's another pill. You don't like that pill, then we'll give you a pill for your pill. And
Right.
I just felt like there's got to be more to medicine. Like I felt like there was something more that I should have been doing. And so around the same time in my career, I had patients, diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, that were really frustrated. And so I, myself being frustrated as well, I was like, let's do something different. So I started helping patients with their self-esteem and then building their confidence. And then I focused on redefining what does wellness mean outside of the numbers. So we're always chasing numbers, right? It's your cholesterol number, your blood sugar number, your high blood pressure number. And what does wellness mean if you're not defining yourself by these numbers and your weight or whatever it may be?
Yeah.
And so after that, I then started working with patients to then change their diet and change their exercise. And we were taking patients off of their medications.
Awesome.
That felt like medicine to me. And so those same patients over time became interested and started asking me questions about cannabis. And this was long before there was a program here. And this was during a surge of more holistic options. And so I always had an agreement with patients. If you're interested in something, I'll give you my medical opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with cannabis, I was like, let's see what's there. I don't, And when I looked it up, I was absolutely blown away by the amount of information, the options, and the possibilities, and wondering why weren't we using this in, traditional medicine. So I really walked with my patients as they were incorporating this into their health, and was really surprised and to see the results that they were getting from using cannabis in a more medicinal way. So you fast forward, many years, and cannabis does come to Ohio. I became certified, and I thought I would do some work at one of the card clinics in town. And I was very kind of disappointed with the approach that they were taking, which was very in and out, very little to no education. And so I decided to not only be certified to recommend medical cannabis, but I then incorporated my training in life coaching, which apparently was really what I've been doing my whole career. And then also I became certified in cannabis education.
So that's amazing. You actually teach at the Cleveland and the Columbus branch School of Cannabis.
Yes.
So ladies and gentlemen, we have the real deal with us today. So I'm so excited you could join us, Dr. Williams. I call her Bridget, so forgive me if I slip up and go back to, hey, Bridget. Right.
No, that's fine. That's fine. A lot of people end up calling me Dr. Bridget anyhow. And so, no, you're wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, all right, let's get right into it. So Dr. Williams, right? I think one of the first questions and most important questions to get into is the legality of it. Yeah. So first of all, I'm a Mother Earth kind of person. I don't understand initially, I didn't understand how a plant was made illegal. Then I started looking into like poppy seeds and opium and things like that. But tell me why was cannabis you know, then renamed marijuana. Why was that
Sure.
made illegal?
So it wasn't always illegal, you know. It's really the historical piece of it is sometimes the most interesting piece to me, because from understanding where we've made errors or how it's become a part of American history helps us really as we move forward, right? And so when you look at the fact that cannabis is really a part of our landscape, when the colonies are being built, when Americans first came here, it was required that farmers have hemp farms, and that they were making cloth, and they were making sails of ships. And the original, the Declaration of Independence, one of the early drafts was on hemp paper. A lot of, so it's, I mean, it's been a part of who we are very early on. And then we actually, the settlers or farmers had to actually, they could use it as currency, as money, and they had to send hemp and money back to England when the colonies were first built. So hemp was always a part of who we are. The more psychoactive aspects of it was never really an issue either. That, you know, it started out in India, Asia, parts of the world, kind of spread around the world, and then eventually coming to the United States through some coming through the Caribbean, some coming through Central America, but it was always considered not a threat and not an issue. There were actually things called teapods that were clubs all throughout the United States where cannabis was used in a more social way, and it wasn't an issue at all. And that for many, many years, I think from 1850 to like 19, oh, don't quote me, I think 1850 for like over 50 or more years, cannabis was a part of the US pharmacopoeia. And so it was in over 200 compound or tinctures that were part of what physicians and pharmacists would provide for patients for different conditions, whether it was for pain or cholera or nausea. It was a part of who we were. So what changed was really, so things changed when alcohol prohibition failed. So when alcohol prohibition failed, you know, it, like I said, it was still a part of our landscape, but the government had to kind of rectify everything that happened with that. At the same time, right before that, the Mexican Revolution was happening, and there was an influx of Mexicans coming to the United States legally, but also using some of the medical cannabis as well. So then there was a decrease in jobs. And it's almost history kind of repeating itself, to be honest now, that with the decrease in jobs, with this influx of immigration, there was a backlash. And part of that backlash was kind of attacking this medical cannabis or cannabis that they were bringing in. At the same time, alcohol prohibition was failing, and the pharmaceutical companies were creating synthetic medications. So aspirin was kind of this new thing that was being developed. And all of these things were happening at the same time. Cannabis was a threat to synthetic meds. And so if you had cannabis that could do so much and people could kind of grow it on their own, how were synthetic meds ever really going to be effective and make an impact? And so having this almost like propaganda that developed to make cannabis seem as something that was not beneficial is what the pharmaceutical companies were doing, what the US government was doing as far as their response after alcohol prohibition. And all of those things happening at the same time led to it being illegal. So by 1937, there was the Marijuana Tax Act that basically would tax everyone involved, between the farmer, the pharmacist, the physician, anyone that was writing, prescribing any form of cannabis, they were taxed heavily. And that's when things started to pull back. And honestly, everything after that is history, right? You know, there's reefer madness, and you know, you can really change people by enlisting fear. And when you put fear in, then things become a lot more difficult to educate and to keep open minds. And the way that people have tried to make cannabis a negative part of our society is by producing fear.
Mhm.
And that's basically, we're barely coming out of that now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like that's I'm in researching. I'm a big history buff, especially on Black history,
Mhm.
African history, and in cultures around the world, herbs were used for everything.
Yes.
They were used not only to spice foods, obviously, but also herbs were medicine. Let
Mhm.
that food be that medicine, medicine be thy food, and we kept that. Even
Mhm.
as people came over, even as Europeans came over to the States, to the Americas, they still utilize herbs.
Yeah.
I watched an interview earlier. It was a TED Talks. I forgot the sister's name. She was sister. A similar story. She was in med school. She ended up wanting to drop out or change her course of action until she realized that she could make a change, in what she was learning. And she mentioned how none of her textbooks mentioned anything about cannabis,
No.
anything about its medicinal properties. And it's been used for hundreds of years before there was writing, before there was anything of that.
Yes.
So, and I think, like you said, fear was elicited, and we were educated ignorantly. We're educated that, okay, this is bad. Marijuana. You're a Mary J head. You're this and you're that. Like, I remember making fun of people when I was a kid when I smelled it on them. Like
Right. Right.
we were taught.
That's what we were taught. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we find nowadays that we're learning. We are relearning how badly our government has jacked us up.
And for profit to be,
For profit. That
for
is
the
the
most
key.
part, right? For profit. Yeah. So a lot of what we know about cannabis scientifically, um, it hasn't been that long, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with you. We've been using cannabis in a medicinal way. First documentations are Asia, 500 BC and even before, right? So it's been a part of who we are since the beginning of time.
Right.
As far as the scientific part, we really didn't know the endocannabinoid system itself until the 1990s, right? And so when you're really thinking about the majority of your physicians, it was not going to be a part of their medical training. And so that's part of those issues there, right? So, however, there's been research going on, particularly in Israel, for a very long time. And that's where a lot of our information has come from.
Interesting. Out of Israel. I wouldn't have guessed that. I wouldn't
Right.
have guessed that. That's
Yep.
interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. So when we look at, so now we understand why it was made illegal, because
Right.
the government could not profit off of it.
Right. Right.
The medical industry could not profit
Mhm.
off of it. So when it comes to the legal differences, are there differences between federal and state?
Yeah, I mean, a huge difference. So right now, um, federally, cannabis is still considered illegal. It's still considered a Scheduled 1 medication. So a Scheduled 1 is basically a scheduling of medications that happened in the 1970s, that basically would list medications as far as their potential for abuse and their medicinal quality. So a Scheduled 1 medication means it has no medicinal quality and is highly addictive. They put cannabis, despite everything that we just talked about, right? They put cannabis in that Schedule 1 category. Right now, federally, it still sits in that category. The reason that you're able to use it in Ohio or in your state medicinally is because it is considered Scheduled 2, which means that it has some medicinal quality, but still considered addictive or what have you within your state. So that's where we are in Ohio right now. Okay, so from state to state, those parameters change. Some states do have recreational license, basically, to be able to, that anyone could use it. And then other states like Ohio, you have to reach certain medical parameters to be able to use it.
So
But
that's your I don't want to say your green card, but your
yeah,
marijuana card, right? That's
absolutely. So your medical cannabis card is basically, in Ohio, there are 21 conditions that allow you to carry a card that allows you to go to a dispensary where you're able to pick up medical cannabis that has THC in it. Yeah.
So if you are you have one of those 21 issues, we'll talk about those a little bit later, but if you have one of those issues and you don't have a card and you are, you decide to start using it and you heal yourself, do you still get in trouble? Because you don't have this card issued by the government, where I'm sure there's money involved.
Right. Okay. So, I guess it depends where you're getting it from, right? So in Ohio, you're not allowed to grow. Okay. So there's no home grow in Ohio. Okay. There are other states where there are parameters where you can home grow, and not to sell, but to only use for either personal use or to a restricted number of people. But every state is very different when it comes to that. But in Ohio, there is no home grow. All of this is really coming to a head because within the next couple of months, there might be some voting that could change everything that, we're talking about. But at this moment, it's, you're not allowed to grow it yourself, and purchasing it outside of the, dispensary does have some penalties. There's no jail time involved at this point for small amounts, but there's more like fines that are a part of it. But they want you to purchase it obviously through the dispensary, and there are really good reasons why dispensaries are a great idea.
Okay.
So if you're talking about a lot of the issues that come up as far as how it's grown, whether there's pesticides, metals in it, whether it's laced with, for a big problem is that people lace this with cocaine or fentanyl or other illicit drugs. So there's a big safety component that allows you, when you go to a dispensary, to know that that's not going to be an issue, because everything's highly and heavily tested. Yeah. So you also, if you're really talking about using it medicinally, you have the option of knowing what you're getting and to be able to get it again. Where when you're buying from friends, let's say, you don't always know what you're getting. You don't know the name of it. You don't know if it's something that's can be more sedating or more elevating. And it's hard to use it consistently in a medicinal way when you don't know what you're dealing with, right? Gotcha. So that's one of the more interesting things that come out of a medicinal program.
So in Ohio, and we can only speak for Ohio because we're here, but in Ohio, if I wanted to grow on my windowsill, one little thing of a plant that came from Mother Earth that God created, I'm gonna get in trouble unless I go and get a grower's license or something like that.
Yeah. When you say it, it sounds horrible, but that's basically the story. Yeah.
You should see my windowsill. I've got like 7 different things lined up, and it's just like this is mine, but okay, I digress. All right, so now when it comes to cannabis, the entire plant itself, I understand there are differences between the effects. So you got the whole plant versus CBD versus THC versus, I'm sure, a whole bunch of other different aspects of the whatever. So can you kind of get into what the differences are and what those who are either seeking to become medically certified or whatever, what should they be looking for?
So there's a lot of layers to that. I would say, first of all, what you're really making a distinction about are the cannabinoids, right? So let me go a little bit farther back. So we have this natural endocannabinoid system in our body, right? And basically it's a system of neurotransmitters, compounds that interact with receptors, and basically they turn off and on different when you hit these receptors, it turns off and on different aspects within neurons, right? The whole point of it is to create balance within your body, and it interacts with the other systems in your body to do that. Okay, so those neurotransmitters or those compounds are cannabinoids, right? So we have natural cannabinoids that are already in our body that we produce that help with that balance system.
That's and the endo part,
right? And then there's phytocannabinoids, meaning plant. And so cannabis has been grown and cultivated over the years to have an abundance of certain cannabinoids. Now, you can also get cannabinoids in black pepper. when you like to use your echinacea when you're sick, you're dealing with cannabinoids. When you like your chocolate and you like the feeling and love the sweetness of chocolate, you're talking about cannabinoids. So this is not something that is just meant for cannabis. It's just that in this cannabis plant, we have found ways to grow it and ways to get an increase of CBD or THC and or other aspects, other cannabinoids, so that when we ingest them in whichever way that we choose, it interacts with our body in a way that can help with different conditions, basically. Okay.
So the endocannabinoid system is a system that forces or encourages homeostasis, essentially.
Absolutely. So it's interacting with your musculoskeletal, your cardiovascular, your respiratory, your reproductive, every system that's within your body, there are receptors, right? And so there are some receptors that act more in your central nervous system, in your brain, and then there's some receptors that act throughout your body. And it's because these receptors are everywhere, particularly your immune system, is the reason why cannabinoids can be so effective for so many different conditions, because there are receptors that interact with this neuronal system everywhere in your body. So we often talk about THC and CBD, mainly THC mainly because we've learned that that's where the more euphoric high type feeling comes from, and that's kind of where a lot of the popularity started. And CBD because we learned about the many medicinal aspects of it over time. But like I said, there are over 100 or more different other cannabinoids, right?
Right.
But those are the two, the main two that we talk about. And so CBD actually enhances our natural system. It allows our natural cannabinoids, your endocannabinoids, to stay in the synapse longer in that neuronal aspect so that it actually works better and longer. So it actually just makes your body work better. And THC actually mimics those natural endocannabinoids. And so it kind of boosts the activity of those natural compounds. Okay. And so at different places, at different receptors in different areas of your body, it might have different effects.
Interesting. So you mentioned that because the endocannabinoid system it interacts with your musculoskeletal, your cardiovascular, your pulmonary, your neurological, with all of these systems, like to me that it sounds like it is almost a cure-all. So when I think of overactive nerves, you know, I think of possibly MS. I think of Parkinson's. I think of Alzheimer's. That might be an underactive. So you're saying that there is a possibility that, or if it has been done already, that CBD or cannabis can help in those areas by balancing out those overactive or underactive nerves.
Absolutely. So they have found that cannabis can be very helpful for neurodegenerative disorders, the ones that you just mentioned, as well as being neuroprotective. So, and that's really how it can help in many of those conditions as well. So, like I said, the research is out there. There is a lot more research that needs to be done, but the framework is there. They're finding incredible information that encourages us to utilize cannabis in these ways.
Now, what about, you mentioned, I'm so glad you did, about the phytocannabinoids and how they are found in many different plants. So you mentioned black pepper, you know, you mentioned chocolate, which is a plant, but we know. I'm curious, what about turmeric, you know, or cinnamon, things that are anti-inflammatory? Is that due to the phytocannabinoids, or is it due to something else?
So I'm not sure about all the other ones, though I do believe that there are some cannabinoids related, but I don't want to say specifically. But the list of plants that have phytocannabinoids involved is a fairly long list. So it's really about just getting some more of that information and being able to utilize it.
So when it comes to the medicinal properties, I know we discussed a little bit. Tell me, in general, what does it help with? Like if especially, I know if I have some certain diseases that might be helpful, but what if I don't? Like, how is it helpful for your typical non-special population person?
Right. Okay. So, yeah. So if you're focusing on conditions, and we could talk about how it can help those conditions, but if you're saying in general, like how does cannabis or CBD help you in general, it goes back to that balance, right? And
Mm.
so you can start as just when you're talking about homeostasis, how is your sleep? And it can help you, look.
Mine is really
Help
bad.
you with your sleep. How, like, if you're talking about just day to day, how is your diet, right?
Mhm.
And there's research that shows that THC, basically, it's a balance thing for people that use cannabis more regularly. They actually found that the underweight person had the tendency to actually gain weight,
Right.
where the overweight person actually was more likely to lose. And
Interesting.
so it's real, again, it's about that balance. If you're talking about your stress, which, in American society, that's life, right?
Right.
And so if you're talking about stress and anxiety, it kind of helps center and calm that. So if you're just talking about like general maintenance, those are the ways that it can kind of interact with your body.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you say it helps with anxiety. I've heard depression.
Yes. Mhm.
What are some other, in general, again, in general ways, if it is disease related, that it helps?
So, well, number one, pain. I think that's where a lot of the research has gone into. And so, if you're talking about pain issues, that they have found that cannabis actually helps decrease the pain sensation as well as decreasing inflammation. Okay. And the reason why this has been so significant is that typically you injure yourself, your brain tells you, you're having pain, right?
Mhm.
And you rest, whatever, you do your physical therapy, you take medications, and little by little over time it gets better. When you're talking about chronic pain, you're talking about more of a syndrome. And so that actually over a 3, sometimes 6-month period, you develop a new set of neurons that
Mhm.
actually are connecting to your brain that are stronger than the original pain itself. And so it's more of an anticipatory pain. So if you know that if you move your hip over when you get out of bed in the morning, that you're going to have pain, your body actually will warn you and
Mhm.
actually produce that pain signal before it ever happens.
Mhm. That's deep.
Cannabis interrupts that anticipatory pain. And
Mhm.
that's why it tends to be more effective for people that have had pain for going on for more than 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned. Well, I guess I'm curious about, because you mentioned the immune system. What about autoimmune diseases, disorders?
hmm So there's still a lot of research that's going on with that,
Mhm.
but because a lot of the CB2 receptors that are throughout our body, a lot of that is connected to our immune system. They find that again, it's being neuroprotective, that it is helping with some of the pain issues that develop with that as well. So
Mhm.
when it comes specifically, there's still a lot of research going on with that, but many times we're looking at some of the symptoms that are related, and we find that cannabis can actually be very helpful for that.
That is amazing, and I feel like we are rediscovering things that our ancestors already knew, and
Yes,
their ancestors
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
other people from other cultures already knew. Like,
absolutely. Throughout the world.
exactly.
Yeah,
Like it's, and
absolutely.
typically you don't see that because typically certain plants are only grown in certain places, but it does
Mhm.
seem to be culturally, ethnically just everywhere.
Right.
You
So
know.
it traveled throughout the entire world
Mhm.
over time. And so there are very few places that were not touched by cannabis at some point or another.
Mhm.
Whether it be hemp because of the actual industrial aspects of it, using it for building buildings, using it like a substitute for wood, making paper,
Yep.
clothing. I mean, there's so many things that hemp has been able to do, and that they found that there was medicinal aspects of it because of CBD over time, but
Mhm.
then also the more psychoactive aspect of the other cannabis plants and what they're able to do as well. So it's basically traveled the world over time.
And so CBD oil is just the oil extract
Yeah,
of
yes,
cannabis.
yes, but it is when you're talking about CBD oil that's available over the shelves that you see everywhere at Kroger's or the gas station and every place else, all of that is coming from the hemp plant. which is a little bit different than your other cannabis plants, right? And so the
Okay.
hemp plants are higher in CBD content
Mm-hmm.
and has less than 0.3% THC with in that growing situation,
Mm.
so that it doesn't have the psychoactive aspects of it,
Mm-hmm.
but does have the medicinal aspects of CBD and some of the other cannabinoids as well.
Hmm. And then
Yeah.
THC is a compound that is extracted, and it can be either certain types of growing, like you mentioned previously. It can be enhanced, and probably others it could be reduced.
Absolutely, depending on how you're processing it.
Right.
But so all of these compounds are found in the trichomes of the female plant, is what we end up harvesting. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you see a cannabis plant, you know, we're always looking at the leaves, but we're really looking at the flower bud
Yeah.
of the plant. And it's that kind of glisteny, um, I don't know, glisteny, feathery look to the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And those are, if you look closely, they're very tiny little trichomes that house all those compounds. And that's what we end up trying to harvest.
Huh. It's amazing how different parts of the plant can be used for completely different purposes, you
Absolutely.
know, and different potencies and all that. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've had some questions from our friends on Facebook. And so I want to get into those. Is that cool with you?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So Kyra Baker out in Baltimore, she says, one question is, can CBD help with children with autism? I have
Mhm.
a 9-year-old with autism and I haven't given it to him yet. So she's trying to
Mhm.
figure that out.
Absolutely. So, yes. So CBD, we've actually been working with quite a few families. Just speaking of my practice in particular, that have found CBD can be very helpful for autism. Now, autism is a huge, huge diagnosis, and so everyone is very different.
Large
But
spectrum.
keep in mind, absolutely, considering the spectrum, but keep in mind that if we're talking about autism, a lot of what we know and the popularity of CBD is because of what growers were developing in Colorado with the little girl named Charlotte. And because she had, she had seizures, I believe. And
Mhm.
but there was also other people there that were using it for autism, and they found that to be very effective.
Mhm.
But with the patients that I have, as far as the calmness, I've actually heard back from teachers as well, and they have found that it can be really helpful for that. So everybody's very different, particularly when you're talking about autism, but we definitely work with families to see if we can incorporate that into their regimen and see if we can get some good results from it.
Now, when you mentioned calmness, that in school, that immediately took
Mhm.
my mind to those who have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD.
Yes, yes. And so, and I'm sorry that I kind of went off the rail there for a second, but the reason I kind of was mentioning the seizure, we actually are working with a group of families. And so we're dealing with children with seizures, children with autism, children with ADHD, and they're all using our CBD brand right now
Mm-hmm.
to incorporate that. So, sorry, I got a little off the rail.
No, that just popped in my mind. Like when
Yeah,
you
no,
mentioned getting calm in school, that's the first thing I think of.
absolutely. So all of these families together are in a group, and they're utilizing a full spectrum CBD
Mm-hmm.
to help their children with all of these different conditions.
Mm.
And so we're kind of following them and walking with them in their journey, and have seen good results. But again, with all of those conditions, the seizures, the autism, the ADHD, they can vary so much. And so we work very carefully to kind of tease out aspects of it that can make CBD a little bit more helpful for them.
So Kyra, make sure you get with Dr. Williams, right, of Green Harvest Health, so that you can talk to her personally about your son. I remember he's a cutie. He's such a cutie. So get with her so that she can give you the proper product, again, if it's cleared in your state, for your son to help with that autism. So that's great. Okay, second question. This is from Dondi Wright. Are there certain strains that are specifically designed for pain, depression, and anxiety?
So yeah, we do look at different strains of cannabis and notes. Sometimes it can be very anecdotal, what you find to be more helpful than others.
Okay.
I would say in general, okay, so if you're talking about pain, I really do look for ones that are higher in full cannabinoids, right? And so a lot of people like Blue Dream in particular, but people like Blue Dream for a lot of different reasons.
Mhm.
But ones that tend to be more abundant in different cannabinoids. If you're talking about anxiety, a higher CBD count is helpful. Um, what I usually send people to the dispensary with, though, is sometimes dividing things up between sativa plants, indica plants, and hybrids.
Mhm.
And so a sativa plant tends to be a little bit more energizing, lead to a little bit more creativity. It's more of a daytime. You don't really get as sleepy on it. And so people tend to like that for more daytime use.
Mm.
Where an indica plant, it can actually make you a little bit more sleepy, is known to be a little bit more helpful for pain. Um, it has a little bit more of a higher CBD content, and just more of a body high is the way it's described, and more
Okay.
relaxing. Where a hybrid is more of that kind of genetic farming that I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so it is a hybrid of sativa and indica plants. We usually recommend people that are not as experienced with cannabis to try a hybrid, because just as the sativa plant might be make some people feel energetic and feel great, another person makes them feel anxious, right?
Because
Or
it's
for
too
the
much
right, too
overstimulation.
much for their system.
Yeah.
Where the indica can be like relaxing, and you just kind of feel very at ease. For
Mhm.
another person, it makes them feel kind of claustrophobic and uncomfortable, right? So we often say go with a hybrid to start, okay? Because you're kind of getting a little bit of each, they balance each other out, and then you can kind of experiment with the sativa and the indica according to your condition. But it it's a complex question because it really depends on what we're talking about.
Mhm. The specific pain or depression, anxiety.
Right. So a part of that question is the essential oils of the cannabis plant. Okay.
Okay.
And so the terpenes of the cannabis plant have a great effect on the difference between one strain and another. Okay.
Mhm.
And so if you're talking about mood, I often recommend someone get a strain that has more limonene in it, because it's more mood elevating, right?
Okay.
Where if you have a lot of, let's say, inflammation and pain, I might suggest more myrcene or more carfulline, which will actually help with more inflammation issues. So when I'm working with someone one-on-one, I really try to get a sense of what, not just do they have pain or anxiety, but what their daytime is like, what their evenings are like, what their sleep is like,
Yeah.
and then try to make a suggestion that I think is best for them.
That, like, you bring up a great point. Like, it's almost makes me, not almost, but it completely makes me understand why there is need for personal counsel with
Hmm.
it, because everyone's individual, issues may be different, but
Absolutely.
also, again, like you said, depending on their stress level, depending on their schedule, depending on
Yes,
every single aspect of their lives, you might
absolutely.
recommend something different.
Right. So if someone, let's say, has continuous pain or continuous, like generalized anxiety, I might suggest more of a patch or a gummy,
Hmm.
something that lasts for a longer period of time.
Hmm.
Where if someone has very acute pain that hits them very quickly, or
Hmm.
they have anxiety attacks, I might suggest maybe you should go for something that's more of a vape that you can use very quickly and hits your system a lot faster. So
Hmm.
there's all these different nuances that once I get all the information together, I try to make a plan that I think reflects their needs and will
So
help them.
you mentioned two things that I want to ask you about in this
Mhm.
question. This response for Dondi.
Mhm.
One, you mentioned when he asked about pain, you said in general something higher in a full cannabinoid, and then the anxiety was a higher CBD count. What are the differences between those two?
So, basically it's balance. Okay.
Okay.
So, if you're talking about, let's say, a a tincture where you're actually processing out the cannabinoids and looking for different balances. So someone that has a lot of pain, CBD helps with pain and inflammation. The other cannabinoids help with pain and inflammation. THC definitely helps with that pain. But if you're having a pain issue, I want you to get more of those other cannabinoids in there. So I would suggest a tincture that's more of a full spectrum, that you're not just getting CBD, but you're getting more of those other cannabinoids to be more effective. If you have something like with anxiety, I might suggest, it just depends on how it affects your lifestyle, your body, your everyday, but I might suggest something that is a great CBD content, but with a lower amount of THC in it, or maybe even a 1-to-1, because sometimes that THC makes people more anxious, right? But CBD is known for helping with that anxiety. And so I would want to make sure you're getting a good amount of CBD in there, but you might need some THC, particularly if you have panic attacks. So,
okay. So with the full cannabinoids, that's because CBD is a cannabinoid, and it's not the cannabinoid, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're saying like the full cannabinoid, there are, you know, several others that could be added in or that would be more beneficial. Is that kind of that whole plant type?
Absolutely. So when you're if we're just talking about processed CBD products, there are full spectrum products that will have CBD. It will have some of those other major cannabinoids and less than 0.3% THC. If you're talking about a broad spectrum, okay, so if you're going into a store and they're, you know, having different products on the shelf, a broad spectrum CBD will have CBD, will have some of those other major cannabinoids, but 0 THC. Okay. And then there's products that are in isolate. And so an isolate will have just CBD by itself, 0 THC at all, okay? And so with our own products that we developed, we have a full spectrum because I do believe in full plant.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we also have an isolate, particularly for people that end up having drug testing, okay? And so even though you would have to drink a gallon of a CBD product that is 0.3% THC to have any real effect on a drug test, you have to feel confident about it. You have to be comfortable. You know, I don't want using the medication to actually cause more anxiety for you. And so I often will suggest a CBD isolate or something with 0 THC so that you can use CBD and have confidence about it and not worry about your drug testing.
So with that, so it sounds like there are 3 different levels, and I'm learning about this just like everybody else is, so this is cool. So you got the full spectrum, which is CBD, THC, and the other cannabinoids. And then you have
a low amount of THC.
Low amount of THC, okay.
It has to be less than 0. This is what you're able to buy at different stores. This is not in the dispensary. The dispensary is going to have more THC in it.
Okay. But is it still broken down in from full spectrum to broad that has 0 THC, but it has CBD and other cannabinoids, and then the isolate, which is only CBD?
So so this is for Ohio. So other states might be different. You will not find an CBD isolate, or even a broad spectrum in most dispensaries, right? Because everything in the dispensary is the more regulated products, and that means they have some amount of THC in it. As far as a full spectrum CBD, you're more likely to find a CBD product that has more THC in it. It's not going to have that 0.3% because that's something that you can buy anywhere else. You know, you can buy it at your wellness center or, you know, outside of the dispensary. So there is a separation between what the products that are sold in dispensaries versus the products that are sold at the gas station.
Gotcha, nicely said.
or at our office. I mean, like we sell CBD products, are highly tested and come from some really incredible cultivators. So we take a great amount of pride in the products that we sell, but there's the stuff in the dispensary is going to have more THC in it. The things that are over the counter are they have to have less than 0.3% in Ohio.
And that's what you have, 0.3% or less. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Dondi, make sure again you get with Dr. Williams
Yeah.
schedule your appointment so that you can discuss with her what your needs are for the pain, depression, or anxiety that you or whoever you're just
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, so it's always hard to kind of make these general comments because everyone is so much different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people assume, well, it's just cannabis, you know, everyone just does the same thing. And based on what I learn about that person, taking into consideration my background as a family doctor or as a life coach, what I recommend can vary incredibly from one person to the next, and they can have the same condition, right? And also their experiences. So if they've not done well with certain prescription medications, or they've not done well just with cannabis in the past in different forms, I might suggest something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
But you can always call our office for appointments. You can always, you know, I'll give you a way for people to contact me, you know, after this, just for questions as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, moving on. Next question. And this one comes from Monica Hutchings. So she asks, can cannabis really aid in MS pain? So multiple sclerosis. I can never say that word. Sclerosis.
Yeah. MS, yes. So there's actually been really great research when it comes to MS, and particularly when it comes to the spasticity that people experience. Not only are the muscles become almost rigid and frozen and uncomfortable, but the pain that develops from that. And they found that using a 1-to-1, that means half CBD, half THC, treatment with cannabis actually helps relax that quite a bit. And also the neuro protective aspects of cannabis also help with MS. And so there's research has been very solid when it comes to that. So I highly recommend MS patients, you know, depending on what they're going through and what they're experiencing, to consider cannabis as an option.
So Monica, you heard it. Try and get or consult for a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC. I want to put a disclaimer. So yes, Dr. Williams is a medical doctor, she's a medical professional, but she hasn't talked to you personally. So make sure you don't take the advice specifically until you talk to her, because your issue might be a little bit different than what she's discussing. And then if you go and just take general advice on these herbal remedies, you might jack yourself up. So again, disclaimer.
Or just not get the results that you would like to have. You know, you might not get and you'll say, oh, this doesn't work for me. Well, there are nuances that are a part of that. And so I'm always happy to work with people.
Awesome. And I've got one more question. This is from Rob House. Now, Rob asked this question. He says, here's my question. How damaging are the carcinogens from the smoke? I know that the cannabis plant has all of the wellness properties, but my concern is the smoke and over time, the possible harmful effects to lungs and throat.
Yes, absolutely. So, okay, when it comes to smoking, smoking is not approved in Ohio. And part of the reason it's not approved in Ohio is that means combustion, right? So if you're making a joint and you're burning it, it is not approved in Ohio, because whenever you are burning, you are releasing carcinogens. Okay.
Yes.
So the recommendation is vaping. Vaping is not smoking. Vaping is getting the cannabis, either the oil or the flower, to a boiling point that releases those cannabinoids. And it's much more like a vaporizer, nebulizer type treatment, where it is a vapor and not a combusted burning smoke.
Like aromatherapy, with like diffusers and oil.
So I want to make that distinction first. Now, when it comes to how dangerous are carcinogens, the research they have found is that when it comes to so they have not found cannabis to cause cancers. Okay. What they have found is that that you're more likely, obviously, with any sort of combustion to have a problem. And so the relationship that they have found between cannabis and smoking is that there's little chance of still that there's a cancer causing component there. Any issue is really from the carcinogens that are released.
Right.
versus with, obviously, when you're talking about tobacco, we're not just talking about combustion, but we're also talking about the chemicals that are involved in there that also lead to lung cancers, right? So at the end of the day, you don't want to combust. You don't really want to intake anything that has been really burnt, to be honest, because even if you have your family barbecue and you burnt you burnt your barbecue and you decide to eat it anyhow, you're still intaking carcinogens. Okay. So the issue here is that there's been no cancer related deaths related to cannabis smoking, period, right?
Gotcha.
But you don't want to inhale carcinogens at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
So you heard it here on Coach Cailah TV. Weed does not cause cancer.
Weed does not cause cancer, but and I'll tell you, the reason that you really don't want to make joints and burn them is that 70% of what you're burning goes right out the window. Okay. Where when you are using some sort of vaporizer, it is contained. And so it lasts a lot longer. You save yourself a lot more money.
Yeah.
When you are really just burning it and you're, that it's that whole, contact high that other people get, because you're basically giving it away. Right. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of talk about vaporizing and, that's probably a whole nother discussion in itself. But at the end of the day, you're burning up what you just bought. And so you might as well just, burn your money along right with it.
That's a great perspective because everybody has heard of that secondhand, that contact,
you're giving it away. That's very kind of you. But if you're trying to use it more medicinally and have it last longer and work better for you, then that's where the vaping comes in.
Awesome. Now I had another question just come in from Yancel Blanks. So Yancel asks, he says, what is a tincture and how is it made?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So you'll hear me use the word oil and tincture interchangeably. But they are slightly different. Okay. So an oil is processing the cannabis plant, right? And then producing it and compressing it until you've developed an oil, which you're actually infusing in a carrier oil with it. The tincture process is that instead of what I mentioned is kind of like a CO2 processing where you're actually extracting out the CBD and other cannabinoids, the terpenes and what have you. When you're talking about a tincture, the difference is really that instead of it being processed and clarified through an oil, it's more clarified through an alcohol, and that many times it can still be added back into an oil form because cannabis CBD it's lipophilic, so it actually prefers to be in an oil for better absorption, but it's basically the processing that's involved. And so people tend to use the words interchangeably because you're not necessarily focused on how it's processed in your day-to-day use, but a tincture is going to be more of an alcohol processing where oils can be actually a number of different ways that oils can be processed, but they're reintroduced into an oil as part of the clarification of it.
I've got one more question. I don't think I've ever got you on the phone for this long. So Dr. Williams is one of my online nutrition clients, and it's just like, hey girl, okay, how's your nutrition? You good? Okay.
So doing better. Gonna do better.
I thank you so much for your time. I know this is definitely out of your way, but I think it's gonna be so helpful for so many people.
I hope so.
And I hope a lot of people are gonna see this and that, you get some information, you get some clients from it and all that. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This was so helpful. I've learned personally a lot about cannabis, about CBD, about the endocannabinoid system. So I'll definitely be looking more into it. And I'll put a list up of the different things in Ohio, different ways you can get your marijuana card or, whatever different issues you may have. But guys, again, a lot of this, you're gonna have to look at your own personal state to figure out what's legal and how to engage and how to get this in your system.
Absolutely.
So Dr. Bridget Williams, I thank you so much. She is of Green Harvest Health, Medical Cannabis, and Life Coaching.
Yeah.
I'll be putting her contact information and be like flashing like right there on the screen or something.
People can always like send us messages on Facebook. We often are answering questions on there, but then to also kind of look at the information at the bottom there as well, to contact us. You know, we're always happy to ask questions.
Well, thank you so much. And guys, if you have any other questions or any subjects that we did not hit in this conversation, I know Dr. Williams and I have discussed having more of these. So bring your questions, shoot them, we'll compile them and do another video. But I think this was super helpful. Again, guys, my name is Coach Cailah. This is Dr. Bridget Williams, and this was a discussion on cannabis. This is Coach Cailah TV, episode 48. Always design your body.